Hello, good morning. So I'm just introducing this session before I hand over to Karen, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here at this really important conference, on inclusive research cultures. Inclusion, equity, and diversity are part of the mission at the UK Council for Graduate Education. So it's particularly good for us to be here and to be able to support this event. I'm just going to introduce some work that we've been doing on what we've called the UK Research Supervision Recognition Programme, and indeed the allied project that we're doing on UK Research Supervision Survey. So the survey was conducted in May this year. We had 3,435 responses, and it's produced a huge amount of evidence about the attitude and experiences of research supervisors here in the UK, but some respondents from elsewhere in the world too. And it's enabled us to produce a report, which is on the web. I'll share a link in just a minute, which really looks at 7 key chapters. So recruitment, selection, funding, supervisory practice, relationship with candidates, development and support, workload recognition and reward, motivations and challenges, and the impact of COVID-19. And in the richness of all of that evidence, the importance of research culture and inclusiveness has really come through. So just very quickly to assure you that it's a representative sample, there are some elements which aren't as representative as they could be, but by and large we are thrilled with the mix of respondents. So 46% identified as female, 50% male, 3% preferred not to say, and the remainder were non-binary or non-gender conforming. In terms of institution type, 68% were from pre-1992 institutions, and 26% from post-99 institutions, and the remainder from specialist or even non-academic organizations. And in terms of disciplinary spread, we had 59 from STEM disciplines, and then the remainder fairly evenly split between arts and humanities and social sciences. But the ethnicity was perhaps less represented in the survey. 89% were respondents identified as being white. So that's the background of the survey, and here's a kind of, for me, the key takeaway points. And I know that Karen is going to speak about some of these more in just a moment. So firstly is that the research supervisors are a really passionate, engaged community. 91% enjoy research supervision and 93% value their involvement with research supervision. And perhaps more important for the terms of this conference is that the fact that 73% would agree that it's their job to supervise a person and not a project. You might hope that percentage is higher, but there may be reasonable, I suppose, explanations for why you would not agree to that statement. But still, I think it's an important sort of marker that the research supervisors conceive of their job as supporting a person first and foremost, rather than a research project. 71% felt supported to enact good supervision and address issues in practice, but only 52% felt valued by their institution. And I think there's a discrepancy there. Team supervision has become standard practice, and in fact, it's broadly agreed that team supervision offers a better experience for the doctoral candidate. And again, this final point is probably the most pressing for this conference. 82% agree that research supervision improves the quality of their own research, and I guess even more encouragingly, 75% said that increasing the diversity of the doctoral candidate population would improve the research culture at their institution. So there's a whistle-stop tour of the evidence that Karen is now going to be talking about. Thank you. Over to you, Karen.
I want to give this some context, and Owen has explained where the UK Council for Graduate Education come from. Many of you I've seen in the chat and the participants, and I know many of you. It's lovely to see you. So I work within an institution. So my position on this was trying to support doctoral supervisors and indeed, of course, students, but really with my sort of research hat on, to recognise that we know quite a lot through the Postgraduate Research Experience Survey and the work that Wellcome Trust and latterly Nature have done about the research student experience. And so you'll see on that slide there, I'm not going to read it out to you, but and many of you will be familiar with these findings in any case. But we know that there are cultural issues and factors that affect the research student experience. And we also know that there are some fairly strong implications around the need for diversity and support for well-being, etc. What we didn't have is any kind of empirical database around the supervisor experience. And I'm kind of saying that with a certain amount of reluctance, because I don't want to call it an experience survey. What we wanted to do was capture the voice of the supervisors and to really understand what was going on for them and the context in which they worked. So that's where we came from. For those of you that are avid Times Higher readers, you may see this morning there's a piece about research students' suicide rates, which is really quite troubling. They've referenced the research supervision survey in that we knew that they were going to use the data. And what they've done is really draw attention to this notion of well-being, and they've chosen that way to sort of supplement it. So I've put the link to that on the bottom of that slide also. So as Owen said, there are some really good some background headlines around this, and we had a lot of data. So we're fairly confident that this is robust and it and it has some sway, we hope, in terms of the breadth and scope. The positive stuff Owen has given a flavour for, and if I may just sort of re-emphasise some of that. They love what they're doing, they enjoy what they're doing, they want to genuinely motivate and train and work with the next generation of researchers. There's a real positive commitment to that, and it enhances their own research. So there's a lot of intrinsic motivation for this role. They are, however, facing a lot of challenges, and workload is one of them. So there's not much of a formal workload allocation. 52% said they had it, 23% were unsure. Time is a huge factor. Lack of time, high workload. The volume of candidates that some people are supporting would seem quite challenging, and that's me being diplomatic. So 15% of respondents said that they were supporting more than 10 research candidates, and many of them typically would like to support between 3 and 4 candidates. So there's a workload issue there. 71% said it would become more challenging over the last 5 years. Now that's 5 years, not last 18 months, although we did ask specific questions around the COVID experience as well. In the interest of time, I'm not reading you the quotations on the left-hand side of the screens here, but you'll see the power and the voice that comes through here, this being pulled in all directions, etc. That the kind of time and criticality that's needed to really support research students is evident. In terms of well-being then, the top 2 percentages there are around the general experience. 32% agreed that concerns over supervision have kept me awake at night. Many of you in institutions, I think, will probably know this, and if you're a supervisor, perhaps this resonates with you also. It's that powerful one-to-one nature, and I say one-to-one advisedly. The supervisory relationship is powerful because they are all-encompassing. It's a role that requires many hats, and you'll see that image has been used to good effect by the wonky coverage of the survey last week. So this idea that supervisors they're being a role model, they're being pastoral care, they're being one hopes subject experts, and they feel comfortable in that latter domain. They feel less comfortable in the areas of careers advice, particularly non-academic careers, and they feel less comfortable around diversity and inclusion, and also around well-being. Their own experience then is that within the COVID period, and recognising this survey was done in May this year, so they'd had a good year or so in a different context. 68% found it difficult to balance their supervision with their own domestic arrangements, and 77% had found it challenging to help doctoral candidates refocus the nature of their research and the epistemological and theoretical approaches that they might be taking, particularly where data collection was problematic due to COVID. So a sense of increasing problems because of COVID. Obviously, online supervision and online vivas also featured, but not significantly. For me, with a training hat on, there were some real concerns here around culture and training, and they're concerns for me. I'm speaking personally here. So there's no institutional formal recognition for 22% of respondents, and 55% were unsure. Russell Group were even lower than that. So depending on which institution you're at, depends on whether you think that this is adequately rewarded and recognised. Reassuringly, for me at least, 70% took part in what they were calling team supervision, and that's typically more than sort of two people, where people come together and can work together to support the supervisor. So that powerful relationship is somewhat more diluted, and people are able to respond. Informal networks and opportunities to reflect and engage in peer review of supervision were seen as really helpful, but it didn't happen very often. Only 27% reported that it happened frequently, 47% they were rarely or never provided with the time or space to create informal support groups, and 37%, sorry, typo, I'll change it, said they were rarely or never provided with opportunities to reflect on their own practice. That for me, is a quick win, actually, something we can do. There's some good stuff in this. It's not all, we don't have to start a revolution here. There's some quick wins. Support training for candidates from diverse backgrounds was uneven and often insufficient, and pastoral care, as I've said, was also problematic, as was providing a positive role model around work-life balance. And if we think back to our keynote, then there are some powerful messages there. So where supervisors feel perhaps more comfortable is as you might expect, around the monitoring and the procedures and the policies. What do they have to do to get through to successful completion? 84%, enacting those procedures, 76%, understanding the policies in the event of breakdown, 65%. But then we move to the right-hand side, and you'll see the areas that I've already highlighted, where there's perhaps less confidence and assurance in what it is that they can do. So, if you're looking for a pointer on developing your own programs, then here's your evidence. When we look at reward and recognition, we're looking particularly at number of successful completions. We're using the metrics that are easy to calculate and measure. So we might want to do some thinking around that. We're looking at the real opportunities here to enable people to talk to each other and discuss and compare notes, and to bring in interdisciplinary expertise, and particularly around where you've got professional and practical and performance-based programs, then the more people that come to the party, it strikes me, and again, this is personal, the better. Not many people are engaging in pedagogy, so if that's your bag, you've got to think of interesting ways to make that relevant and appropriate. So here are some thoughts then about how we might enhance supervision in terms of research culture. So there's this team supervisory approach. There's bringing in external supervisors. There's reward and recognition. There's training. There's maybe, and I'm going out on a limb here, at selection and recruitment stage, and this is very much to do with EDI and cultural diversity, really exploring the preparedness and the resilience of people to do a doctoral study in the first place, and not just taking people because for whatever reason we think that's a good idea. And there's lots of different ways in which we could use mentoring and coaching and peer-to-peer support communities. So real whistle-stop tour, there's some links there. Owen's put the link to the excellent report that he has authored with all of the findings in there. And then there's a couple of press pieces there. I'll stop right now and enable conversation and discussion. Thanks.